thank you, and welcome, hello. This is, I want to make a rhythm game, but I don't know how, based on real-life experiences. Quickly, who am I? I'm Lislis. If you see this name with connection with this avatar, which probably people are familiar with, it's very likely me, but maybe also not, you never know. I come from a background in web dev, which is also why I have web-based slides, and I'm also now really happy that we get to use our own computers, because otherwise this would have been really awkward. I've been making like small hobby games since around 2015, which seems like a long time. It also tells you that I'm old to some degree, and I still feel like I never learn anything, but you know, sometimes you can stand on stage and still feel like a total noob. What brings me to Godot? So I've been making hobby games in various programming languages, environments, what have you, and I think a lot of people, I first heard of Godot with the 3.0 release, but now I think I want to get serious with it. So I try to make as much games with Godot as I can, and this brings us to the actual story of this talk, because once upon a time, in July, I went to the Berlin Mini Jam, which is a great jam if you live in Berlin. It's one day, so it's really just like a regular work day. It's about 7 hours, because you also have to eat something, so it's not a lot of work time, but it's great for just getting to the nitty-gritty of your game idea. And in July, the theme was ducks. So I was thinking in the brainstorming session, duck, 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 while other people did other stuff, like thought of very great games, actually. I was like, how about a rhythm game based on the German children's song, Alle meine Entchen? If you heard people maybe chuckle around you, they're German because they know the song. If you don't know what it is, here's a quick facts slide. This is it. So Alle meine Entchen is German for all my ducklings, my little ducks. Think of it as the equivalent to Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's C major scale, just like Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's very easy if you're like a child trying to learn the piano. You can play it with one hand. And for the lyrics, they will not actually appear in this talk, but maybe you're interested. I translated this myself. So all my little ducklings swimming on the lake twice. Heads go underwater, tails up in the air, which describes this image of ducks looking for little things in ponds. This is all you need to know. Maybe surprisingly, nobody wanted to join my jam team during this jam, so I decided to make it myself, all by myself. I've never made a rhythm game before, and still kind of like, okay, Godot, I have to do it. And I thought, how hard could it be? Yeah, exactly. A lot harder than I thought, as it always turns out to be. I'm like, I never learn. It's always harder. It's always more complicated. There's always more to it. I put my jam version on GitHub, because I always do that. Notice the comment that says it is in fact not working at all, because it isn't. You can still look at it if you want. There's a screenshot. I drew all the assets myself. I also made the sound myself. Yes! We will hit the song later. So basically my idea was like, oh, it's just going to be one button, it's really simple. The notes come flying in, it was supposed to be the sun, but forget it. And then I ran into these issues of like, nothing is lining up ever, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Why is this so hard? There's even some bits in the Godot documentation about syncing like gameplay and music, and I read it and I'm like, I don't understand. So at the end of the jam, I didn't have anything playable. So I was like, okay, usually I, make a jam game and then I drop it and forget about it. But this time I thought, I should make something that is at least somewhat playable, because I don't have to be good at something, but I hate being really bad at something. So I'm just like, I wanted to make an adequate version of this. Also, my microphone dropped. Whoop. So like this. So off into the rabbit hole I fell. Maybe what's a rhythm game? Just really quickly for people who ended up here because they didn't want to go to the other thing. So it's a music-themed action video game that challenges a player's sense of rhythm, typically focused on dance or simulated performance of musical instruments, and requires players to press or step on buttons in sequence dictated on the screen. So it's very loose. That could be anything with music and pressing buttons. I did research, because everything in games is always research, which involves playing games and reading lots of things on the internet. So the first actual notable rhythm game was Parappa the Rapper, which already introduced the sequence, thing on the screen appears and you press a thing in time. That was the original thing, and we're still doing exactly this, basically. So if you sometimes wonder, why is game design for a certain genre always this? Because this game made it first. But then we have Dance Dance Revolution, probably the most widely known and most successful one, and it introduced two very important things for rhythm games, which is the arrows, that you have arrows and you have to press in directions or step on the controller. Which brings us to the second important thing, is custom hardware and custom controllers, which I think is really interesting because I also dabble with hardware and alternative controllers a lot, so this is an interesting prospect. And then big mainstream success is obviously Guitar Hero, once again with custom controllers, but also this thing called the Note Highway, I believe. So it's okay, these are the classics, the mainstream. Things get interesting when you look into the hybrid space, and I'm going to rush through this just to let you know what you can play at home. Geometry Dash, Geometry Dash, Rhythm Platformer, Crypt of the Necrodancer, Rhythm Dungeon Crawler, BPM Bullets per Minute, Rhythm First-Person Shooter, Hi-Fi Rush, Rhythm Third-Person Action Shooter. Whew, okay. But I want to also point out some other things that you can play. Trombone Champ, amazing, so good. Also made with Godot, that's the only one that says made with Godot. Cats on Mars, which is kind of a rhythm RPG type of thing. You can play it on itch for free. I didn't make it to the dance competition because I couldn't even play free the leotard, so I'm so bad at it. But it's cool. And I also want to point out Dance of Fire and Ice and Rhythm Doctor, because they're made by the same people. Because the developer behind these games also wrote extensive documentation about how to make a rhythm game, which helped me personally a lot. I will mention this again and again. Very nice. Okay, now the research is done. Let's get to making. So the big question is, how exactly do we do this now? Luckily, I'm never the first person to ask a question on the internet. So in subreddit rhythm games, how do you make a rhythm game? People are well, that's a broad question. But closer to my question is how do you stay in sync with the music and the gameplay? How do you do this? How does this work? Something with BPMs and frame count and understanding the arrow speed is kind of what I had with moving the action items on the screen and stuff, and it's never aligning for me. So I dug through all these questions, not all of them, a lot of them, in Google and searched, and I identified basically two approaches. One that I personally call conductor-based, and the other one I call MIDI-based. So first, let's talk about the conductor. And the name comes from this idea of that you have a conductor who conducts the orchestra. It's a class or a note, depending on the engine that you're in. And this conductor is keeping track of the timing. And then everything is based around this conductor. So the only ingredient that you need is the song, and you need to know the beats per minute of the song, and everything else is calculated from it. And everything that has to do with time is in reference to this conductor. And this is also where you put the little snippet from the Godot documentation of how to sync the music with the gameplay. It goes in there. Quick, I don't know the BPM of my song. There's online tools for that. You upload it, it figures it out for you. Nice. If you want to make, rhythm game like Audio Surfer, where people choose their own song and then they can play their own song, then you have to do this stuff yourself. Yay, another rabbit hole, which I did not go down, but here's some search terms for you. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, feel free. These are the main resources that I used for this. Mostly the How to Make a Rhythm Game technical guide, which is named from the developer of Dance of Fire and Ice, and Rhythm Doctor. Is a little bit of interesting internet archaeology in there, because it first appeared as a Reddit post in 2014. Then there's other guides that also name their classes conductor, and then there's another post which is updated by the original person. It's somehow this name conductor is a common theme here with the inspiration going on, but they're all focusing on Unity. And then there is one very good video from the Legion Games account, or Legion Games, that ports this idea to Godot, basically putting, or like sitting on top of the audio stream player, making it kind of like a conductor node. The video references Godot 3.2, but it's kind of easy. Like even I could port it to Godot 4, so you can do it. The other approach is kind of very different, and I was surprised how easy it was. If you also notice, it is actually the approach that I tried to do at the jam, except that I didn't know what the fundamental difference is between the two, so I just like scrambled all over the place and just like I couldn't even made it work because like I did, or in my head I mixed the two approaches without noticing that I did that, which ended in this chaos that I found myself in. But back to the MIDI base. So MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It's lots of things. It's a protocol, it's an interface, you can buy hardware, like it's a hardware connector thing, it has cables, and broadly speaking, it describes music electronically. So if you have a MIDI file, it contains infos like how many tracks there are, the time signatures, when is a note being, or like on an instrument, is it pressed, and when is it released, how quickly or forcefully this button was pressed, and stuff like this, lots of information. And then for this approach in your game, you need a MIDI file with .mid at the end and the final song it represents. And then it's a very programmatically approach where you read the MIDI info into a buffer, and then you play the MIDI the MIDI file and the song at the same time, and then you compare timestamps basically, and then you can just like easily say, hey, this was like exactly on time, this was like with a little bit of delay. So like the times of the original MIDI file, and then when people actually interact with your thing. And this was so easy, it was like, wow, this is, had I fully understood what was going on during the jam, I could have done this, plus the art and the music in 7 hours. It's incredibly easy. But the question here is, quick, where do I get the MIDI file from? It's easy if you do your own music. You probably have a digital audio workstation where you can export the MIDI that you put together. Nice. Sometimes friendly internet strangers will write these files for you and put them on the internet for you to download. These are mostly like piano versions where you like have the visualization of the MIDI notes on YouTube. Maybe you've seen this. If none of these work for you, that's kind of maybe already in a no-go area, and you should go to the BPM version. Interestingly, the MIDI approach is not widely talked about, at least like not what I found. There is, however, this video about making a rhythm game with Godot and MIDI, which is, it's kind of a very brief video. Luckily, there's the repository where you can like look at the code. It's once again for Godot 3.2, but it's easy enough to port, because the plugin it uses, Godot MIDI Player by Arlay 80, is available for both Godot 3 and Godot 4. So it's the same interface. So I use this, and the video uses this. And sometime in between July and now, there's another Godot MIDI player that popped up on the asset store. I have not tried it, but it probably does the same thing. So maybe it's cooler, I don't know. You can try it. Okay, so you want to make a rhythm game? You should pick one of those two approaches, ideally. Which one do you choose? And it depends. Sorry. These are debatable, both depend, but like as a guideline, I would say, for the conductor approach, it speaks that you really only need to know the BPM of your song. If you want to have like one song and you want to make a game around this, figure out the BPM with an online tool and maybe go for this. I think it also offers the most flexibility in terms of game design, because you basically have to build everything around it anyway, so you can build it however you want. And I think it's also more useful for like open-ended music. So if you go for like a more hybrid style, you can like have it play for as long as you want, and then maybe generate the actual interactions that you want to ask from the user on the fly. In theory, you can also do this for the other, but I think for like a first-time approach, this should work too. For MIDI, I think like the point that you need the MIDI file for this to work, and if this is like a no-go for you, this approach is kind of out. The cool thing is, if you have access to the MIDI file, is that you can also encode non-musical behavior in this, for example, animations or anything else that is supposed to happen at certain timestamps, or you can just like base other things in the level on certain things that are already encoded in your music, which is kind of dope. But I think since you have to kind of program the level almost in your digital audio workstation, in your DAW, it's kind of like very, very well suited for things that have an end, like classical rhythm games have. If the song is over, you get your score, and that's it. Cool. I also couldn't choose because then I learned about both these approaches and was like, I don't know. For my small game, both kind of work. So I made 2 versions. And since I only learned recently that we could bring our own laptops, but I had already recorded the demos, I will show you the demos, but if you want to find me afterwards, you can play them on my laptop. So this is the first approach, where I chose the conductor version. Let's see it. There's also audio, hopefully. Yes. So notes fly in. I get like a little feedback. Get a little animation. We don't have audio, do we? Okay, it was quiet. This is also me playing it. This is really bad. So on and so on. Yeah. So I reused all my jam assets basically because it's a very low effort approach. The other one is with the MIDI file, where I could then also, I know which notes are coming out, so I could like make it more like a typey game. I could also sync the duck to the beat, and when I get a grade, I can like have the duck down into the water. Also, you can see that my MIDI file is not actually that great as well. And miss, because I'm bad at my own games. Nice. Okay. Duck, duck, duck. This is actually the end of what I'm presenting. Image references, thank you. There's slides where you can find these things, because I linked all of the stuff, so you can like look at that and download it. And also the version in the end, where I have the 2 implementations, is also up on GitHub. So it's basically both approaches written in Godot 4.3. So you can like also look at that if you want to. And then if there's questions, I can answer them, hopefully.
Why are you using a MIDI file instead of like defining an animation? Like Godot has animation tracks, and you could perhaps use keyframes to call a method and then use that to check the difference. Or is there something else I'm missing?
So as I understand it, like I would still need the time codes from the music that I'm playing, and like have to manually enter it in the animation player. So like. So at this point in the song, I want to have this animation to play. But in my case, I make the sound myself anyway, so I already do all the stuff in my DAW anyway. But you're right, actually, this could be like another hybrid approach where you say, okay, I have the sound file and I look at the individual time signatures and then encode it in the animation player, for example. Why not?
Yeah, because Godot has tracks which can also call methods and stuff like that. So it's a double approach. All right, thank you.
Hi. So I also worked on a rhythm section for my game. It's also a duck game. And from my experience, I noticed that not every single audio file works best for even the conductor approach. Like if it's a live performance, for example, I noticed the BPM doesn't always match 100%, and it only works if you make a MIDI file or if it's a digitally created audio file. Is that the case?
I have not tried it with a live recording of things, but I guess then you have like just natural people not being super on time. So I guess
that's what I've noticed. I found this out the hard way, and that's why I ended up having to do this hybrid approach with the audio file created as a MIDI originally, then I exported it as a WAV, and it worked as a conductor.
Okay, but you would also say that you used the conductor approach like in your...
I did, but it was with a MIDI file because that was the only way to get the BPM 100% Correct.
Okay, cool.
Because it didn't work with performance. Live performance didn't work.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Had you have to deal with input latency and visual latency of your displays?
So the input latency is, or like I found it, so you saw my demos, it's not like very intense. So the input latency was like, it was okay, it was not that much of a problem for me. Also like playing like the small particle animation stuff that for me as a player looked okay and felt okay. What I did not do, because that was more tricky, is like if I wanted to play like little sound effects in time for the thing, because then you always, because then once again has to like be in reference to the actual audio chunk that is being like rendered. And I was like, do I really need this right now? No. But like for the input latency, like on a game like this where I play with the keyboard, that was fine. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi. Because no human can actually hit it like specifically, precisely, and at one point, right? Like, what margin of error did you use for that? Like in probably milliseconds, right? How much did you use?
So for the MIDI approach, where I actually put it in, it was like 0.2 seconds actually. So that was like. That was fine, I think. It was at some point I was actually just like, maybe this is actually too easy. So you can like actually, whatever feels right. The interesting part is in the conductor approach that I implemented based on the tutorial. It's actually using like collision shapes for like determining how well you did. Not timing based, but saying like, okay, if you have like this is the okay area, and then a smaller good area, and then a very tiny perfect area, and then you basically check with which section does your error interact with, or like is in right now. So this is like independent of the timing, which can be interesting. I think depends on like what you want to go for, but yeah.
First of all, thanks for the talk. And my question also goes for latency and latency calibration for other users. I don't know if you have gone into that rabbit hole. So basically, are there different methods of doing calibration for users' latency? It's different for the conductor of the MIDI files, or how does that work? Because I'm very annoyed when the games doesn't have calibration.
Yeah. So I think roughly there's two types of calibration. I think so. There's the regular in computer, figuring out how much delay is between your audio and the main thread, and the Godot has like the audio server. I forgot what it's called, but you can just get this time directly from the engine, so that's kind of cool. That worked enough for me because like I was like mostly playing this like on the laptop. So if you have something like a controller or like you project it somewhere where it's just like more hardware latency between the things, doing like a calibration step would make sense. I actually watched a video on this. I don't think I linked it, but like on UX for rhythm games where they talk about this. Exactly the step of calibrating. And the thing is I think they recommended doing the step of like just having like a tutorial level where you have people like, hit this and tell me you did it well. And based on this, I will calculate the actual like offset that I will use from then on. Which seems like, okay, I think Crypt of the Necrodancer does this when you have to like press on the button, a couple of others do that. If I were to make a serious rhythm game, this should definitely be a step, but like for a simple like hobby kind of thing. I think with just getting the little latency from the audio server, I think that's fine. Yeah. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah,
okay.
quick question or quick point. So if you want to do the conductor approach in Godot in a more easy way, I have a pull request open on the engine repo that adds a signal that's emitted on every beat and every bar, which makes it much easier to sync visual effects or gameplay to the music. So I think it's called Beer Tools. Everybody can check it out if they want, but yeah, makes that conductor much easier to sync with an actual music file if you have electronic music.
Nice.